All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Any declarations of interest? Yes, conflict of interest, yeah. Okay, thank you. So we have no actual public forum today. So let's move on to our presentation by Councillor Ros Connolly from the Regional Council. Come on, Ros. We'll do your presentation first, Ros, and then we'll have questions afterwards.
It's got my. Sorry.
Yeah, it's right.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Councillor Ros Connolly, so I'm the Upper Hutt Ward Councillor on Greater Wellington. But of course, I'm also a former Upper Hutt City Council alumni. So it's lovely to be back here today on such a lovely day. And I'd like to thank His Worship the Mayor and Chair Heather Newell for inviting me to today's policy committee. So the purpose of my presentation today is ostensibly to run through Greater Wellington's LTP decisions. And so I've been told to hold questions till the end, but I'm also happy to answer any other questions that you had. So when we get to that point, where am I pointing it at? You? There we go. So this presentation was done by our comms people for a more general audience, so I don't need to tell you guys what the long-term plan is about. But essentially, we do these every 3 years, and I believe it's for a really, really important reason. I think that local government actually leads the way in terms of long-term planning in a number of cases. We're certainly better than central government at identifying what our asset base is and how we're going to fund that over the next 10, 20, 40 plus years. So that's essentially what the LTP is about. But of course, the key decision that comes out of the LTP, one of the key decisions, are where we're going to set the rates for the following year. So a lot of interest in the LTP from that perspective. So many, I mean, you know, this year's LTP, and again, I don't need to tell you guys, has been an incredibly difficult exercise. The pressures that local government sector is facing, not just any particular council, are largely around the massive increase in infrastructure construction costs going up at somewhere near 10% per year, insurance going up by double digits, and of course inflation, meaning that our borrowing costs have massively increased. So quite a lot of what we're presenting in here, other than an option to not do some critical stuff, there really aren't a lot of decisions to be made. It is what it is, and I think it's been really valuable to have the whole local government sector kind of aligned in that message that local government rates are a poor way to be funding local government activities. And unfortunately, due to a range of factors, including lack of investment over the last few generations on our infrastructure, it's come to a head. And if we want to provide the necessary things for our communities and our economy, we're going to be looking at large rates increases. But there are two items on the consultation document that we are genuinely interested to hear people's feedback on, and will adjust our thinking accordingly. So these are control of public transport assets and ownership of centre point. It's not centre point. People keep misquoting it, which is kind of amusing. We don't need a cult at Greater Wellington, I can assure you. So the discussion around controlling bus depots is really about how do we tender for our bus contracts to get the best value for money for our ratepayers. And one of the problems that we have, it's not just a problem in Wellington, but is land and particularly electricity supply as our bus fleet is electrified. It's very, very difficult to find. It's not so bad in the Porirua Kapiti catchment, and it's not so bad in the Hutt, but in Wellington, it is absolutely near impossible to find land that fits the requirements for a bus depot. So essentially what that means is if any one company has a bus depot in Wellington, they are the only ones that can tender for a bus contract, because no one else can tender for a contract, because they know that they won't be able to reliably find the land and set up the electricity supply required to tender for the contract. So the idea of Greater Wellington owning those assets would be that we would then own them, and we would offer them to any potential tenderer who could provide the service, and it wouldn't be reliant on them coming to the party with those assets already in the bag. So we believe that this will actually be cost neutral over the longer term, because the cost of tendering bus contract will reduce, and Greater Wellington will have what will be, a rare piece of real estate in the Wellington region. We've got one lined up already in Lyell Bay. We tried to purchase another one, but we failed. But and there are some other assets that are owned by companies currently, but at the end of their bus contract, they can hand those assets, or they're obliged to hand those assets back to Greater Wellington. So if this is somewhere we want to go, we're already well on the way to making that happen. The other decision is around Centreport. This one I think has been a little bit more, I would say, controversial, but there are more kind of people on both sides of this debate. So essentially, Greater Wellington already owns 77% of the shares in the port, and Horizons District Council is the remaining shareholder. And they have indicated that they would like to get out of their shareholding, and they've asked us if we would like to buy it. Now, nothing formal has been discussed. So the big elephant in the room is, what is the price of those shares? That has not been discussed yet. We're going out to consultation first, but on their books, the value of those shares is sitting at 63 million. So would we like to purchase it? In favour of purchasing it, really, I think the biggest argument is, if it was to be sold to someone other than Greater Wellington, it would dilute that publisher ownership of a really, really strategic asset. So that's a key reason why we would want to retain control and why we would want to purchase those extra assets. Over time, we're hoping that it will make us a little bit more money. At the moment, we're predicting returns of 6%, but that is that is expected to increase. And obviously, I guess just the strategic value of the port being a place where goods and people come in Wellington can't be kind of underestimated. So we believe that it would be good from strategic reasons for Greater Wellington to own 100% of the port. I guess especially now, as discussions about Kiwi Rail and ferries are still so up in the air. This is something that we would know that the public has ownership in, and we can develop it for the best interests of all New Zealanders, but primarily the Wellington region. Then there's a whole bunch of other things on the agenda, or in the long-term plan document. I think I've run through some of these in a little bit more detail. I thought so I'm going to run through the ones that I thought you'd be primarily interested in a little bit more detail, but these are some of the things that we're actually looking to increase some spending on. So, the decision for us, as with most councils, was, what can we stop doing? But also, where do we need to continue investing? So we're determined not to allow our assets to degrade any further. We want to ensure that they're kept up to spec, they continue providing the services. And for things like flood control, we just don't think it's kind of negotiable to not be ensuring that the Hutt Valley, which is New Zealand's most populated floodplain, is adequately protected. So these areas, we're increasing our budgets, some of them not massively, but obviously Riverlink is a big project, which you'll all know quite a bit about. It is funded two ways. It is funded through general rates, but then it's also funded through a targeted rate on Lower Hutt. But it does affect the whole of the region from a rates perspective as well. Energy transformation, I think there's a slide on that. As I said, due to buses, but also due to a couple of other of Greater Wellington's activities, our need for electricity is going to increase over the next sort of 10 to 20 years. So we're looking at alternative ways that we can supply electricity that might be environmentally friendly and will be a cost saving in the longer term. Sky Stadium, I talk about that a bit more detail. Flood protection, I talk about. Pest management, I talk about. Regional parks restoration. In the last LTP, we embarked on a very ambitious project, which was it's known as Recloaking Papatuanuku, but it was essentially to plant all of our regional parks in native bush. Up to that point, a lot of them had been grazed. And one of the questions about how cost effective that was, we didn't get a whole lot of money from the grazing licenses, and we were obligated to do a whole bunch of things like fencing and stuff. So it was a bit, but also when we were looking at our carbon emissions, our corporate carbon emissions, the emissions from those animals was quite considerable. So we're replanting for various reasons, but primarily as a carbon sink for the whole region. I think we maybe bit off a bit more than we could chew last time. I think councillors were really enthusiastic to get planting, but the reality was only so much planting can be done in a year, and you need things like plants. And we pretty much cleaned the Lower South Island out of the number of plants. So we're taking more of a strategic approach to this now, including establishing a nursery to help develop some of the seedlings we're going to be putting in the ground. Public transport fares, I'm not sure if I put them in, but as well as a sizable rates increase, we are also putting up public transport fares by 10%. That is, again, highly unpalatable, not something we want to do, but the reality is that government funding, particularly in the rail space, is under more and more pressure, particularly since the last GPS that the government has only just announced. And, you know, our public transport is now funded a third from tickets, a third from rates, and a third from government sources. And that seems to be about the balance that we think we should be maintaining. So, although I, for one, would love free public transport for a whole raft of reasons, it's just not doable under the current government funding. More bus services. We had a protracted incident with not enough bus drivers last year and the year before. That is now being resolved, but we need to ensure that it stays good. We need to ensure that we've got the buses and we've got the bus drivers and we've got the depots to keep the buses on the road. New trains, it has the most dreadful acronym, LINRIM. LINRIM is the new trains that we're purchasing that will primarily go on the longer haul routes, so to Wairarapa and up to Kapiti. But obviously this flow-on benefit for Upper Hutt because those trains have to come through Upper Hutt, and we've removed the surcharge to get on the Wairarapa train, so any Upper Hutt residents can jump on those new trains and go through to Upper Hutt station. And then there was just a reference there to the GPS putting more pressure on public transport and other active modes of transport. So we're talking here about storage lakes. That was cool. I didn't know that was going to happen. It didn't happen in my PowerPoint, was it to me? Yeah, so obviously, you know, again, not news to anyone around this table, but demand for water is a big issue. And one of the ways that we can alleviate that is to build more water storage. So Greater Wellington owns land suitable for this in, they call it Pakratahi, but now I've visited it, it's more Kaitoki, in my opinion. It's where the old ag research was. And that is where we're proposing to put these new storage lakes. At this stage, the cost is design and consent, not actually building it within the next 10 years. But we have had conversations about bringing that forward. But again, for the next at least 2 to 4 years, we're going to be in that design consenting phase.
So that just goes over there.
Can I just interrupt, comment?
I don't know if you're allowed, Chris.
No, well, if I may,
No, please
I
wait.
won't remember, so I'm so
No,
happily.
please wait. Otherwise, we'll have free for all.
Okay, moving on. Pest management. I think that this was a thing that councillors were really keen to put a bit of extra money into. You know, we own some magnificent natural places around the Wellington region, and many of those are in the Upper Hutt district. But increasingly ungulates, so deer, goats and pigs have been a massive problem. And our current pest control methodologies are focused around possums, rats and mustelids. So there really wasn't anything going into this challenge. And so that is going to be increased in the priority. And also when we're putting so much money into these replantings, these things absolutely decimate it, as well as their effect on biodiversity. They also, because they eat so much of the foliage, they minimise its carbon absorbing capacity because they're eating it rather than letting the plants grow. So that's something we're putting more money into. That is all the numbers. I'm not going to go through them, but I dare say council has the slides, so
Yeah.
I'll report it to you. Flood protection was another one that I did just want to touch on. Obviously, flood protection is one of the fundamental things that the regional council does, and it's costly. And you know, at the moment we've identified that River Link is the weakest link. So that stop bank between Kennedy Good and Melling, that has a very poor return period in terms of the likelihood of Lower Hutt being flooded. And you know, if we experience something like Cyclone Gabrielle, it would have been just absolutely horrendous in Lower Hutt. Those stop banks would not have protected the community. They would have burst billions of dollars of residential property, roading, hospitals, you know, you name it, would have been destroyed, not to mention potential loss of life. So that's the first cab off the rank in terms of large scale flood protection. We are also doing some other works, particularly focused around Upper Hutt. So there'll be more flood protection works happening basically from Silverstring to Moonshine. I did try to get a bit more detail from the flood protection staff, but they say that things are still to be worked through in terms of exactly what flood protection method they use. So whether we're talking rocks, whether we're talking groins, whether we're talking more nature-based solutions. But apparently in that Moonshine to Marley Bank, on the left bank, there are some stop bank works that are planned, as well as just rock groins for a lot of the rest of it, particularly shoring up the side that's the State Highway 2 side, so that the river doesn't encroach on the road. So yeah, I mean, we had a presentation presented to us at the Te Awa Kairangi subcommittee, what used to be the flood management committee, showing that you know, our flood protection or our flood assets, whilst they were still delivering the service that we could expect, they were degrading in terms of their asset quality. And as a council, we just said, we can't have that. So more money is going into flood protection to make sure that it's well, the 1 in 440 year return period is what we're talking about being an acceptable standard for such a populated area. Again, that's some numbers on. So what does all that mean in terms of rates? Well, unfortunately, it's a pretty big number for our residents. It will be just under a 20% rate increase for this year and 13% for the next couple of years. And that equates on average to $2.95 increase for our residents per week. So these are the dates on the long-term plan. We've got another 5 days if you wish to make a submission, and then we'll have hearings, and then we'll decide where we're going to be. And you know, the long-term plan hearings are always challenging because people have their priorities and things that they would like to see funded, and you know, often they're really amazing projects, but we're not going to be in a position to fund all of them, or indeed many of them this year. But those are the priority things that we've identified. And so we're really interested to hear your perspective on where you think we've landed. And I think that is the end.
Okay, thanks very much, Ross. That was a great whip through. Yeah. All right, so councillor Carson has
The first question I had about the two lakes, additional lakes, was under the proposed new infrastructure, critical assets infrastructure planning process. Will that
The
come?
water services plan.
Yeah, will that come in terms of consent, will that come under the fast track type approach to getting consent?
Well, as you know, no one knows what
Yeah.
the list of projects the ministers are considering are. So at this stage, I can only say I have no idea.
Greater Wellington requests.
councillor Bentley.
Sorry, just on that same question, would Greater Wellington, because people being invited to submit their projects, would Greater Wellington submit?
I don't know. I don't believe we would, because we just submitted quite strongly against the fast track consenting bill, which essentially said, this is the classic case for these lakes, actually. Consenting is not the thing that's slowing people down. Lack of money is the thing that's slowing people down. And actually, at the moment, until we move to a different water services structure, we would be up against our debt. Well, we would be over our debt cap if we were to fund those lakes. So under the current structure, we need things to change before we can fund it. So I think it would be, risky for us to pursue fast track for that.
Thank you.
Supplementary?
Well, is it on the same topic?
No.
No, well, just hang on. Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Chair. Ross, you mentioned about the residential rates, say 19 and 13 and 13. What's the commercial rates?
Businesses, sorry, I don't, well, the percents are the same for businesses, but that equates to different numbers. So that equates to $7.65 per week increase for businesses
On average.
on average.
It's this year.
Sorry,
This year?
this year, yeah. And the rural is $2.90.
Couple of years.
I don't have those figures in front of me.
I have
Okay.
a question on a similar vein, if we're sticking to themes. Is that-
Councillor Swales, yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
So my understanding then, Ros, by just what you said, that the percentage increase that is being put in the chart, so for the next 2 years after the first year is 13.44 for businesses,
Yes.
same as residential.
Yes.
So how do you get the differential of $2.95 as to opposed to $7.65?
To do with,
Well, if the residents are paying $2.95 and that's, 19.9 and then 13.4, 13.4, but you're telling us that the base start is $7.65 on average for businesses, but the percentage rate increase is the same. How do we start at a different starting point?
that's a good question, actually. I don't have the answer, but we don't have a business differential. So, in fact, we did have a business differential that we removed. I will check whether I'll get back to you on that, check whether there are additional targeted rates or whether it's just a question of value.
Yeah. Okay.
So these figures are based, the idea of these figures, and so we've got the figures for all of the Wellington region, obviously.
Yeah.
So they are trying to work out an average based on an average house. So I assume this is just an average, the average cost of an average business. And obviously the average cost of the average value of an average business is considerably higher than the average value of a residential business. And that's what I'm assuming that it is, but I will check that for you.
I'd appreciate that because there are, if you're looking at capital value on footprint, some of them are no bigger than a residential property.
Yes, but obviously that's an average, and some of them are quite big. Yeah.
Councillor Hammond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ros, your control of the public transport assets and centre for how do you intend to fund it?
So they're both going to be funded through debt and debt funded and then ratepayer getting the money to pay off those debts.
No,
Carry on.
at 6%, you'd be better put it in the bank.
Yes. However, putting it in the bank doesn't achieve those strategic objectives.
Okay,
Okay, councillor Bentley and then his worship.
Yeah, just on that similar vein, I'm just trying to struggle to understand how that will affect the strategy of Centre Port. If council already has majority control, they can dictate those terms. Having 100% control, what extra levers will Greater Wellington get?
So as I understand it, and I'm not a director on Centre Port, so I don't entirely know how it operates firsthand, but is that yes, we do have the control and share, but that is kind of by virtue of, I guess, negotiation with the minor shareholder Horizons. Again, you know, if a private buyer was to look at those shares, that relationship might change because at the moment, you know, we have all local government whānau and we want to make decisions in the best interest of the whole region. But it's considered that it would give us just an easier route to doing the strategic things that we want to do.
Yeah, but that doesn't just reconcile with me though, because you have the controlling share. Like someone else can come on board, but they can't overrule you if you have the majority votes on the board.
Which is why we're not entirely convinced that it will be particularly attractive to anyone else.
And sorry, just one more on that same thing, Chair. You said the 63 million, that's just what Horizons have placed on it.
Yep.
Does that marry up with the value that you placed on your shares?
Yeah, so
That kind of lines up?
it marries up with the value that we have on our side, but yeah, that is completely different than obviously a market determined value. And as you say, because it's a small shareholding, because it would be minority controlled, we're not convinced how much interest they would get if they took it to the open market. So, you know, I guess there's a bit of, again, whānau, they're looking to make some cash and
Yeah, that's nice for them, but if we're borrowing at rates that are higher than the return on investment, it doesn't seem like a good deal for the rest of us who'll be paying that bill,
yeah,
right?
understood. I guess looking at it from the longer term, though, we can probably expect the value that we're getting from Centre Port to increase, and you know, inflation won't always be at the rate that it is currently. And this is, as I say, this is one that has not been cut and dry. There've been a lot of a lot of different perspectives have come on this one, so it'll be interesting to see where that lands.
Thank you.
Thank you, your worship, and then councillor Swales.
I've got two questions. One is that, so the 20% rate increase and then also on top of that, we'll be facing about 20% on bulk water charges increase.
Yeah, so you will have already included that in your rates increase.
So does that, so can you, is the money generated, the bulk water cost there, is that entirely used for cost of delivering the bulk water, or is that used for other money?
No, it's completely ring-fenced.
And the other question I've got is that you obviously would have received email during the week, last week, I've had some publicity about the court cases that have gone on. Can you give us an update, because one of our citizens here is involved, and whereabouts is the settlement on that?
Which, so you're talking about Mangaroa?
Stu Adams.
Rather than talking about the one over in Carpenter.
Yeah.
Okay, so people are conflating the two, and they're two separate court cases, and although they were both about wetlands, they are quite different court cases. So, you know, there's no particular reason to conflate the two. On the Mangaroa case, you know, as you know, what happened, Greater Wellington took two actions against that bit of land. One was a criminal prosecution against Stu Adams for various things, including moving sediment and driving through river courses. And he was found criminally liable. He was convicted of the criminal charges that were brought against him. But then Greater Wellington brought another case, which was a civil RMA case, which prevented the 11 landowners, which had it been successful, prevented the 11 landowners from building without jumping through significant hoops, because Greater Wellington believed that those plots of land were wetlands. Now that went to court and it was found out not to be a wetland. And so, you know, that was very embarrassing for Greater Wellington. And we issued an immediate apology to the 11 landlords that were affected. And we have settled with all of those landowners. The only ones we have not settled with is Stu Adams. And essentially that is because he has not provided sufficient evidence from a forensic accounting perspective to prove the losses that he is claiming he has suffered. So that's where that is at.
Thank you, councillor Swales.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One of them is around the centre port as well, Roz. So, on the horizon, LTP, they are not consulting on selling their shares.
No.
So they need to consult because it's a significant amount of money. So you're asking the public or GW to actually give you an opinion when the holder of those haven't even consulted.
They
So-
haven't, and I can't give you a reason why they have chosen not to put this in the LTP,
Yeah.
but they were the ones that approached us on whether we would be interested in buying it. So I don't think we're necessarily jumping the gun. We're just positioning ourselves so that we can either move into more formal negotiations with them, or we can't, we won't.
So with the 6%, you know, the $6 million and then the 6% interest that are projected in the LTP to span over the next 6 years, I need to actually support my colleague there and say, why would you actually flag that away? And why would that not be an attractive proposition for an investor to have that return and not actually worry about any decisions when you're the major shareholder?
Well, those two statements are inconsistent. If it's going to be attractive to a shareholder, then it should be attractive to us. The question is, it's not potentially not going to be attractive to a shareholder, and you can make the case that it's not attractive to us because we already have the majority shareholding. But if you believe in public ownership of assets, particularly strategic assets like a port, this is a way to ensure public ownership.
I think your statement is in contradiction as well, but I'll leave that here.
Was there another question, councillor Swales?
No, I'll.
Okay, so councillor Carson.
Well, I haven't heard of anyone that borrows money to buy shares.
It's the same as government borrowing money to pay fees,
And it's because you have the luxury of a ratepayer acting on mercy that you're able to actually propose to buy the shares through debt. So I don't think it's a sound decision on my point. I will be submitting that it is a wrong decision of the Greater Wellington Regional Council. And I just don't see why it should happen at all when you have majority asset. I don't buy the argument that it should remain in the public. It's a rhetorical question. It's remains in the public interest at all.
So the question, councillor Carson?
The question is, why aren't you selling all your shares and reducing your debt?
because we believe that for the residents of the Greater Wellington region, and in fact the Lower North Island, it's incredibly advantageous to have Greater Wellington owning that asset.
What is the advantage?
Well, we run that port extremely well. Things like health and safety and environmental concerns have been massively are massively better than Auckland Port and Tauranga. So, you know, it's a good little port. And you know, Napier Port has been threatened by us and has tried to get us out of the market, just showing that actually this is a really good strategic asset, and with its not only its freight side of things, but also the fact that it serves as the connection between the North and South Island. You know, I just don't think we should be giving up what is essentially a fundamental part of the transport network.
Thank you. Yeah, councillor Bentley, was there another?
Yeah, questions, my chair. Just on the buses. Would owning the depot then maybe position Greater Wellington to bring actually the services in-house?
That's an interesting, so we have we've been in-housing some services. So the what do you call it? On demand that we've run in Tawa, we ran that. Well, when we say we ran it in-house, the only thing that we don't do, we still contract out the actual driving of the vehicles to Mana for that service, but everything else sits within Greater Wellington rather than within a bus company. So, you know, the new you know, the government has opened up that as a possibility. So we will be looking at it, and we've got, you know, a lot of water to float under the bridge before we make those decisions. But yes, the possibility is there, and it's certainly in some instances. So for example, with the airport, what do we call it now? Not the flyer, with the airport bugs. So when the company that was providing that service shut down, we at that stage, Greater Wellington was not allowed to run that service itself. We had to contract that out, and we had to contract it out according to the rules of the, you know, according to the rules that the government set down. So that was an extremely lengthy period. It was like a year where we had to undertake procurement processes in order to provide that service. Now that service is awesome now, a massive jewel in the crown of meddling, but if we'd been able to just deliver it ourselves, we would have been able to deliver it a lot quicker. So, you know, there definitely, I think there are some instances where Greater Wellington may look to deliver services. I mean, we won't be actually driving the buses ourselves. You know, there was a joke about that when the bus driver shortage got really bad. But aside from that, we won't actually be driving the buses ourselves, but we'll be looking potentially for some services to take more of the decision-making in-house. But you know, I still envisage Transurban or a large company will be running the trains similarly to the bus fleets.
Speaking of trains and buses, bus replacements, this is not LTP related, but you're here. There was a story earlier in the year about how bus replacements on the weekend could be common for the next 5-10 years. Any update on that situation? Because that's
well, if anything, the situation has kind of got worse since then. So we've been informed over the course of sort of the last 6 months that KiwiRail's asset situation is more dire than we were initially informed. And unless they get quite a bit of money, I think it was 160 million, fairly promptly, we could have major shutdowns on the Hutt Valley line. So unfortunately, bus replacements are part of the current network, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. But having said that, you know, I think we all concede that Greater Wellington has some work to do in making those bus replacements better. One thing we have done is put bike racks on all the buses. So if you turn up with a bike, you can now get on a bus. We're also undertaking a genuine real time. So at the moment, if you go to a bus stop that has your bus will be arriving in 5 minutes, that's only basically a predicted time from when it last went through a sort of a node. But now it will be genuinely real time. So if your bus is stuck in traffic, or if your bus driver's had some medical event, that will be alerted to you immediately rather than the current situation. So we are doing some things to try to improve the situation, but obviously all these cost money. And that's where you see the rates being moved.
Do KiwiRail charge Midland to use the lines?
Yes.
And when they shut them down on the weekend, do you get money back?
I assume we do. I mean, they argue that that we don't pay enough for our share of the lines. However, you know, it was a negotiated agreement, but that negotiated agreement was based on the lines being at a steady state. So essentially, you know, bringing them up to asset standard and then maintaining them. And clearly they weren't at a steady state at the time we all signed on to this agreement. And they're now saying that we should be contributing quite a bit more in terms of our contribution to the lines. But this is the very live conversation that we're having at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Carson?
Yeah, I remember Steve Taylor, who telling me that you were looking at bus services on demand on a trial basis.
Yeah.
What's happening on that?
So the trial is delivered in Tawa, and we're continuing to fund that. So under the one of the last land transport rule changes, we were testing it out, but what we wanted to see was whether the government would fund it. So the government gives us funding for public transport called the FAR rate, which is the government contribution, the funding assistance rate. And at the time we initiated the trial, on-demand services didn't qualify for the FAR rate, but we wanted to test it out, you know, as a bit of an innovative project just to see how it works. Now we know that the last land transport funding changes, they will be eligible for the FAR rate, so that's good. That bodes well for extending it to other places. But we're not sure whether that is within a fixed envelope, i.e. whether we will have to reduce other services in order to provide on demand, or whether that's additional. So we're waiting for that key piece of information. The reality is, with the funding constraints we have around Kiwi Rail and bus drivers and depots and electrification and all the things on our plate, you know, it's a nice to have, and it offers some massive, exciting possibilities, but at the moment it's probably not a priority for rolling out further beyond Tawa. But we're just keen to keep it in a holding pattern, see what we can do. And there's also kind of talk about, so in Tawa there was basically no service in those hills. So this is a service where there wasn't one before, but there are other places that have a bus service that is poorly utilised, and that still costs the ratepayers considerable amounts of money. If we were to take on those services, we'd be saving some money from removing the scheduled bus, and we could put it in on demand. So that may be where we're looking to head, rather than supplementing the service with on demand. But yeah, unfortunately, money is tight. So
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
I've got one question. The Sky Stadium earthquake strengthening, what's the story with that?
So, well, so you may not know, Greater Wellington is a shareholder in Sky Stadium. So we own it. We're a minority shareholder this time. Greater Wellington City is the majority, and maybe Wellington NZ. Anyway, we're a minority shareholder. It was built in 1999. So it's starting to get quite old now. They have basically held their own in terms of delivering a stadium, and a stadium, you know, a venue that has been attractive, and they've been able to keep up with their own asset demands. But because of the challenges that the COVID period posed to them for a number of years, they weren't bringing in money, and they asked the shareholders if we would contribute this additional money to help them earthquake strengthen the stadium.
Councillor Hammond, and then we'll make this the last one.
You thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got one question. If you are successful in the control of public transport assets, buses, you are negotiating with 3, Mana, Urban and Transit, is that correct? Will this be a hostile takeover?
So if we're looking to buy new bits of land outright, then, you know, we'll be doing it in a fair market environment. And, you know, we'll be competing on the open market against anyone else that wants to buy it. When we talk about that, you know, how I mentioned there were those clauses in some of the contracts that require them to give back the assets at the end of the contract. I can fairly confidently say that some of them are not thrilled with that prospect. But I don't think they're thrilled with the strategy altogether. But the reason they're not thrilled with it is that it lessens their leverage. So those that have control of the strategic assets at the moment are in a position to charge a premium, and that's what we want to stop. So, you know, why would they be thrilled about this direction?
Okay, thank you very much, Ross. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it. My pleasure.
Thanks. Okay, folks, so do we want to put in a submission on behalf of the council? Our time is very tight, and we would need to perhaps give the officers some steer as to issues that we are concerned about. Yes, Councillor Swales.
I think that we should put a submission in for the mere fact that we've done it before. There are a couple of issues that I think need to be put out there. We are in a tight, constrained environment. Just looking at the compounding features that they're going to do. In the past 3 years, the compounding interest rate on the residents has been 60.6%, and that has been introduced by the Alison Trustram Rainey, who was one of the financial people. So 60.5% increase over the previous 3 years is huge. And then when you look at the 46.6, I mean, that's hidden behind our take of it. I think there are a couple of issues here that we could suggest to them. particularly around Centreport, and maybe looking at the investment between, you know, more to rail than maybe buses. Yeah, I just think that we should have a look. There are a couple of that would be happy to,
something.
yeah,
Good, good.
to help. Yeah.
I'd be a little careful about that. Talking about cumulative rating.
Oh, I'm not going to do that, but I think we need to talk about their asset ownership and things like that and their priorities.
Yeah.
Particularly, a lot of our people are quite heavily reliant on the trains and train bus replacements for trains.
Is an issue.
Absolutely.
And councillor Castle.
I think so. There's nothing in their submission, LTP draft submission about where they made reductions.
Yeah.
And I'd like to have that question asked about where they have consciously reduced costs or attempted to reduce costs. So, and reduce debt.
Yeah.
So I think that the submission is just about empire building. And they haven't taken, I don't think, they haven't demonstrated in the submission that they have taken a responsible attitude in terms of trying to hold
Savings.
rates. Well, they may have done.
Bear in mind, the consultation closes on what, the 22nd?
Week yesterday.
So, let's be clear on what particular things. So the transport,
And Centreport.
Centreport,
But what are we even going to say?
Well, sorry, wait. I think with regard to Centreport, the mere fact that they're going to borrow money and the argument that we put there, they're already the major
Yeah, I agree with
shareholder.
Centreport.
I think that those are things that we could put out there on the table, for them. Yep.
Yeah, no, I think we all agree on Centreport, but it's more the other stuff I was.
Well, I think there's an importance to this, and I know there's the cost.
The water.
The water.
Right.
Yeah,
The storage rate.
Yeah.
we support the lakes, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
so
we've been harping on it.
yeah, just remember, we can't actually do a resolution because we haven't got time.
No.
But the chief executive has suggested that we give some steer.
Yeah.
And then something can be drafted. So have we got a list?
Well, we're talking about Centreport, we're talking about the names.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
order of those.
Evidence of where they've attempted to reduce costs.
Yeah.
My own concern is towards the ratepayer that we're getting hammered again. And so anything that'll save money or stop them spending money has to be good. So if we can do something in that vein, there and just, remind them that there are people out there hurting.
Yeah. But we need to be specific, so, and we're saying that the accusation will come straight back to us, so we'll have a go with it yourself.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't think we can just bash them on everything.
No, it's got to be topics. Yeah.
And this is going to be a quick submission and we have to get agree on what we're saying, otherwise we all have different
It doesn't have
views.
to be.
No.
No.
Yeah,
And I'm not thinking that it should, but I think those things, about Centreport, the lakes,
and transport.
and where have they tried to make some savings?
Okay.
Because it's not in the document, right? In our document, we've said, this is the level of service, this is what we've given them options. Yeah, and it's not.
Yeah, our LTP was all about cutting costs and cutting services. This one here is another bastion to
It's like that.
Well,
Okay.
it's no different.
Is
So we're just going to make this an action. Staff have offered to come back to us with something, so we'll just an action point.
Thank you.
And we can
Circulate it.
circulate it around via email.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to number 5, the director's report, planning and regulatory services. And I think, Helen, you may have some items to update us on.
Thank you. Just a quick whip through and I'll include para references. So just a few corrections and things to point out. At para 11D, this is the list of regional growth framework projects, so D, specifically in relation to the FDS. Look, I just noted that there wasn't, we just failed to include that, that, officers did make a submission and specifically sought, the re-inclusion of sites for living establishments. And it was limited in the final approved version of the FDS. So officers actually sought that re-inclusion. And just by very quick summary, the reason for that is because without that inclusion, which it hasn't been included, is it just creates some policy framework uncertainty, in particular for growth sites in the city, specifically things like the southern growth area. So just wanted to note that. In relation to at Appendix 1, this is the list of district planning program updates. Specifically, bottom of page 10, it carries over to page 11. That's in relation to plan change 49. I just wanted to note, I picked up a typo, and that's in relation to the hearing was reconvened, and that's now physically being completed. And while I'm there, just to simply note, so the reconvened hearing itself has been physically completed, and its current status is now we're just waiting for the panel to confirm the closure of the hearing, and upon that, we'll obviously move into deliberations. The third point I just wanted to make was in relation to Appendix 2 to the report, which is the draft submission in relation to the fast track bill. I just wanted to acknowledge, just at least conceptually, that there may be questions and discussion about it, and just that I've helpfully received some specific feedback. Yes. And I anticipate there might be some questions and discussion about that, but simply to say, I guess my overarching summary of those points are they were about some suggestions where we could tweak and refine or perhaps be a little bit more emphatic, and just wanted to note that, certainly from the officer's perspective, I believe that we can make some tweaks there to improve what we've written in Appendix 2. And final point, I just wanted to note, just following the last item, there was just to assist the committee, there was some discussion here in the context around the storage lakes and fast tracking. And I just wanted to note for the committee that at para 25 of the draft submission, so that's an Appendix 2, para 25, the current draft of the submission just has some suggested text there and some suggested relief, which is essentially seeking a provision, a broad provision in relation to infrastructure interests of Upper City Council. So I just wanted to simply link those dots to help the committee. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, so yes, Your Worship, questions?
Yeah, just on the feedback to the fast track approval, I mean, I agree, and I think we should highlight just that we are supportive of it. And the other thing, the only things that I think don't need to be too overly complicated, just to highlight the ability of we can't recover costs, and the ability to extend that 10 working days out. That is going to create problems. I think it's great.
For you, Chair. Thank you for that, Your Worship, and specifically on that point around the time frame, Deputy Mayor had specifically suggested moving that to 20 working days. The wording that we did have in the submission was to the effect of making sure that it was proportionate. But look, I think it's a helpful suggestion to start with 20 working days, and perhaps also retain the increase in timeframes are proportionate to the matter that's in front of the panel.
Yeah. Councillor Carey, were you going to say something?
I guess in my view, I would say I'm not supportive of it. Really put my opinion here. I think it's an overreach of power, and even if I read through the document predominantly, it's outlining a lot of concerns that are pretty significant, but yet we remain generally supportive of the council. I think things are at odds as well, but that's all I would say.
Any other questions? No?
No.
Yes, okay.
One quick question.
Oh, all right, Councillor Wheeler.
Just on 33 significant natural areas. So is that being pushed out, what, 3 years, is it?
through you here, well, I suppose as we set out most paras, there's been a little bit of bounce around. Look, in terms of the broader reform, and the SNAs come from just one particular instrument of national significance, so that government has signalled legislation to land and to guide specifically on that. The simple point is the SNAs, so they are in our program, but I think the central government has signalled that we will see a slowdown and perhaps even a sort of a firmer position on SNAs. So it's, at the moment, it just sits in the program. It's a watching brief, as we are doing more generally right across our reform.
Okay, I'm going to move the council receives and notes the report, planning and regulatory services, seconded by His Worship. All those in favour, aye?
Aye.
Against?
Right.
Oh, sorry, councillor Carey. Did you
Yeah, if you can record it.
record it? Yeah. All right, directors report, strategy, partnerships and growth. Liesl, do you have any comments to?
Thank you through you, Chair. Not a lot of particular comments, just a couple of minor updates, on the long-term plan submissions. We're halfway through the submission for the consultation period at the moment. And you're currently sitting on submissions, to date. Expecting those to increase as they usually do towards the end of the process and, the last week of April in particular. The other point was just under the representation review, just noting the relatively live item around the recent government announcement of new legislation in relation to Māori wards, and just advising that officers are working through that and a range of information being provided from DIA and the Local Government Commission and so forth. There is also a webinar that elected members have been invited to this coming Friday. If you wish to attend to learn more on that particular topic, but in general, officers will be bringing back some advice and further information to councillors on that in the next couple of weeks.
Great.
Just one final comment, if I may. It is today our strategic policy manager's last policy committee meeting. So Catherine has been in her role for just over 18 months and has driven a lot of work on the policy work program. So I just wanted to acknowledge her and thank her for her efforts.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, councillor Bentley.
Yeah, thank you. Local water done well, the water service delivery plans. How are those conversations going in the region? What stage are they at? To whoever wants to tackle it.
Either the city or the group national operations.
Through you, Chair, at the moment, I guess all the groups are currently being formed as representation on has been locked in. The last council to make decisions confirming that made those decisions late last week. And that's going to then kick off a whole series of workshops and meetings, starting almost. The aim is still to have some preliminary report available at this stage.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun there.
You did.
So thank you, councillor, sorry. I thought it just exploded. Sorry. But yeah, I just thought
Okay. Any other questions? No? Yes, councillor Swans.
So when you look at the open for submissions as of the 28th of March 2024, and you see all of them that have passed, and then you get to the ones that are open, is that information given to us because you're asking us to say whether we should submit, or is it just an FYI? Could I have some context about why I'm looking at it?
Director, would you like to reply?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it is more of an FYI to give you an idea of the range of work that is, I guess, happening across the sector. If there is anything particular of interest that stands out that you'd like to discuss or would like to consider any action on, then I guess we're open to that, taking that direction.
So you want that from us tonight, or is it something that we can come back to you?
Through you, Chair, happy either way.
I'd like to ponder a little bit more.
Okay. And I suppose the key thing would be just making sure of timelines that, you know, we're not leaving it too late to put some input into it.
It's got dates with it, Chair, and TBCs.
Yeah.
Oh, through you, Chair, just to confirm, so the TBC column there is about Taituara on whether they are submitting or not. It's not about council, just to be clear.
But it likely timing is TBC. That's likely timing from who?
Which
You've
one?
got agency engaged, likely timing and Taituara action. So you're at TBCs and a couple of columns there. So I was just thinking that was that they hadn't decided when. Is that right?
Through you, Chair, correct. So that is Taituara saying they are still to confirm whether they are submitting, not whether council's submitting.
So when the timelines for us, either see like Resource Management Act, RMA, replacement legislation, environment, so I get who is gonna the agency and then likely timing end of 24, 25, most likely 25. But then when I go down to new national policy statement for freshwater management, it says FMA Board of Inquiry to be confirmed 2025 submit. So that's where I'm a little bit unclear.
Through you, Chair. So I guess this is a Taituara document that we're referencing. The column in the middle indicating the timeframes are indicative from them. Some have got firm dates where there are known closing dates for submission. Some are longer term pieces of work that are yet to be confirmed. That's why some of those dates in the middle column are not specific. And then the final column next to that is just whether they are taking action and still considering their own submission action.
So I have another question.
Yes,
So
yes,
this is actually us contributing to their submission or us being notified that we would make our own?
Through you, Chair, it could be either
Okay,
or both.
all right, okay.
And just to add to Chair, the workshop that we attended last week, there are a number of councils indicating that they do not have the resources to be able to contribute to this type of work program that it's, even for much bigger councils than ours, it's becoming quite a burden. But equally, there was a question raised about, given the speed with and determination which government are moving forward, to what extent it is worthwhile contributing to some of these things as well. So I'm not saying either of those views are right or wrong. I'm just saying that is what the response from around local government seems to be at the moment.
Can I make a comment on that? So then what really concerns me is I'll pick up what one of my colleagues said, is that the unintended consequence of fast tracking things coming through and putting them on the table, knowing that those that are elected to be the voice of the community are not in a position to actually respond. I think that is really poor, and it concerns me that that is what's happening when I look at the weight of some of these issues that are coming up. And if we're all being told, no matter what our size, up and down the country, that they don't have the resources to do this, then what's the point of local government?
Good question. So that was the question.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the point?
Okay, so I'm going to move that the committee recommends that council receives. Sorry,
Yeah, no.
Just
councillor Wheeler.
this is director on policy item 9, the dangerous and cemetery building policy. When will we see that finalised with the draft come through?
Through you, Chair, as is noted in the report here, the policy has been handed over due to resourcing constraints to the Director of Planning and Regulatory Service to complete the work that's still required to bring it back to Policy Committee. So the timeframe for that will be confirmed as soon as possible.
Chair, I'll just add to that. There's Chair, so tomorrow actually, the team, Richard, you can imagine that in the PRS policy group, they're obviously very busy with a variety of things on the cards, various things we've talked about today. And there's actually a section to actually look at the program and business mix. That's obviously high on that list of priorities across the PRS. So I'll be able to imminently report that. Thanks for the question.
Okay. I move that the committee recommends the council receives and notes the report after the director's report, strategy, partnerships and growth, seconded by councillor Hammond. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, next we move to the chief executive's report.
Already there.
Done. That's, well, Chief Executive, anything you want to just highlight before questions come along?
Through the chair, no, it's, I guess, just an illustration of the intensity with which things are coming our way.
Yeah. So councillor Carson?
In terms of the Wellington Water Committee meeting on the 15th of March, can we have the papers for that up on Stella, please? Because when you go and have a look, Wellington Water Committee, you can't find anything in terms of meeting papers. So can we have that, because it's such a hot topic, from now on Stella, please? The Wellington Water Committee meeting papers, can we have that up on Stella, please? And
You want the committee workshop as well?
Yeah.
so if we have a Wellington Water, I think we've already got a Wellington Water space on the Stella. We could just add in the future, including the 15th of March, if we may, the Wellington Water papers that are for each meeting.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't see any issues with that.
Good.
Thank you. Second, I've got two others. And also in terms of the CE, the governance group, looking at the water done well, group, the governance group, which the mayor and Councillor Bentley is the substitute. Can we have that also, any papers or any minutes or whatever, also on Stella about that, please? So we are continually informed about what's going on in that space, which I think what Councillor Bentley was trying to do. And lastly, the Wellington Water Committee workshop on the 15th of March, what was discussed there, please?
It was all.
We'll let the chief executive.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, are you passing it over to Councillor Swales, or I think you should answer.
Well, through the chair, there have been so many of them, I'm probably going to confuse it, but
Water meetings.
I'll let Councillor Swales have a go at it. Perhaps the Johnson.
So really, I was fortunate enough that I stood in. His worship had a funeral to go to. So I was our representative there along with our CEO. We talked about water meters. We talked about all of the infrastructure projects on the table. We've had a number of presentations, so it was really a lot of the same old, same old. There was nothing new that was put on the table. If there was, we would definitely put it to you in the report by the CEO, or Wayne or I would have put it up, but it's nothing new. It's the same stories. The figures haven't changed that they're giving. They're still talking about Seaview. They're still talking about our out of consent. But with Viola, the filters, all those sorts of things, yeah, and then the long pipe that's going out. So that was part of it, right?
And through the chair, I just want to add that the papers for that were pre-circulated.
No.
These were presentations.
That's right. Just wanted to know what the basis of. Because you did, sorry if I may, Chair, you did say that while you list all the meetings you go to, you were thinking about expanding on certain areas. Because I mean, it's just a broad statement of what meetings you went to, which generates questions about what was that meeting about.
Yeah, through the chair, that you'll see that next time. Yeah.
Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Chair. Question for perhaps, the discussion on water meters, what was the general outcome, tone, consensus?
Well, as you see, if you look at the doc, which I'm sorry, a lot of you probably haven't said, but in the consultation document that Greater Wellington Regional have put out there, that saying that actually all councils are looking at putting in water meters, but we've said that that's not true. So there is still a strong consensus around the table that water meters are the answer, but there was also some conversation around, you know, the ability of not being able to actually do that. And our position was that we would put a business case together. And that's kind of where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, just to add to that, that discussion did focus in on the councils who were waiting for a business case. They make a full and final commitment. And part of that business case process was to identify what a likely implementation timeframe would look like, you know, would perhaps impact on each council.
And how would it be funded?
Yes.
And then my second part, when the mayor and chief executive met with the ministers, did they signal any desire or ambition for the councils to pursue water meters?
No.
No, through the chair, there was no discussion.
Thank you.
Yes, councillor Carey?
Yeah, just a request, Chair, as with the, on papers, not loading again, I guess as with our submission on the, fast track approvals, and we're making follow through the policy here, I don't see where we did that for the submission on the draft GPS for land transport. So can we just, if we are getting those out, council submission, we make them public and available as part of our agendas as well. So we've got the released submission on the draft GPS for land transport, attachment 6.
Yep.
I guess that didn't get public, it didn't get circulated probably before it went out. Is it? I guess what's the appropriate policy here? Because we did it for the fast track approvals above. Do we do that as a business as usual?
Yeah.
Through the chair, I thought we had.
It was circulated amongst us, I know that.
Oh, the community, you mean?
Yeah, the community.
Don't typically do that for councils.
No.
So public meeting.
Yeah.
Probably now.
Because they are able to submit as well.
Through you, Chair, I believe it may have been to do with the timeframes for completion of that submission, if people are willing to decide to be able to publish it in advance.
We don't typically take submissions on a submission.
No.
That's
In the interest of transparency and what we're saying, I suppose.
well, I suppose if I can
Yes,
answer
yes,
that is, we used to have a legislative committee, which we disbanded, but maybe it's something that we bring back because this government is hitting us hard and fast. But normally we have always taken the tact under the terms of reference that we were the elected people of the community, that they gave us the delegated authority to do what we perceive after reading the bill, the best for the community. And that hasn't really changed.
I'm not arguing it's
Yeah.
inconsistent with
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
will put in.
Okay, no, councillor Wheeler and then councillor Osborne.
This is a question for councillor Swales, actually, with the Wellington water. With water meters, was there any mention of Wellington City Council's proposal of leasing of meters? Was that ever mentioned at all to any of the other councils?
No, that wasn't tabled or mentioned at all, councillor. Yeah.
But through here, that has been raised by Wellington City Council, with the councils prior to this particular workshop. And it's my understanding that that's still a live option in terms of the business case, which we are planning on contributing to as part of the campaign. So that would be an option that would be explored.
And the business case itself, we will get
Has that come through?
Oh, through each year, it hasn't actually started yet. That's pending the LTD.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Money's-
Councillor Ultra.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the better off funding money left from the previous government's three waters and whether that, do we know how much is there and whether it's enough, like it says that it's for, contributing better off funding to councils to cover, is that staff time? Or will some of that actually go directly into infrastructure?
Through each year, there were two sources of funding from government. There was the transitional funding, and we still have some of that funding left, and that is funding that would be used to contribute to our share of the next iteration of what water delivery might look like. The better off funding, we had fully allocated that to infrastructure projects, and from memory, I think it was 7% of our allocation was to water-related projects. Those projects have all pretty much been delivered, and pretty sure we now have all the funding. If we haven't, I've still got the applications lodged. So federal funding pretty much gone, but the transition funding, which we would use to do some of this further work going forward, is still a bit of that.
Thank you.
Okay, so all happy? Yeah. All right, does someone want to move this time that the committee recommends that council receives and notes the chief executive's report? Helen, okay, councillor Bentley will move it, seconded by councillor Carson. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, we will now move into public exclusion, and thank you to our one visitor. Thank you, Michael.